I've done just about all I can do on the engine until I get that oil cooler in. So I'm looking for a few more things that need to be done around on the airplane. One of the things I can do is check the fire extinguisher here now. I've inspected it, it's all in good shape, there's no debris in the nozzle, it's still in the green here, everything's fine on it, but we need to weigh it. It's supposed to weigh between 0.9, let me see what it says here, between 0.9 kilograms and 1.11 kilograms. So this is in grams, and that's 1109 grams, which would make it 1.1 kilogram, which is just right. We go to pounds, so that's ounces. Pounds is 2.4 pounds, and it says anywhere, it says 2.7 pounds plus or minus 3 ounces, which makes that 2.4, almost 2.5 pounds, so that's good. And the mechanic last year decided that I should change the rod end bearings, the rod ends on the flap controls. Well, I got new rod ends, and this one is just a little bit sloppy. It's got rust in it, and this one was okay, but I changed both of them anyway, just because I bought them, so I might as well change them. So I did that, and then I checked the rigging on the airplane on the flaps to make sure that they operated properly and come down the right amount and everything. That's better. Well, while I was doing that, I got to looking at something else that I came across that I'd missed. And these are the wing struts, and this is the rear wing strut. And while I was changing that, let's see right there, there's some rust on there showing through the paint. So I got to looking, and I found a couple of places where there's some rust showing through there. So I get some sandpaper and clean that up, polish that up, and paint that up, get that rust taken care of before it becomes a serious problem. A little rust right now, it doesn't affect the strength of the struts any at all, but we'll get it taken care of before it does. Now, I've replaced these struts once. The original ones that came on the airplane got pits in them. They were at the point where I didn't trust them anymore, so I bought new struts. I tried to get some from Airframes Alaska. They told me they would ship them, and then they didn't have them or something, so I wound up getting some from Stoddard's. Now, Stoddard's is a good outfit, but they deal with Univair stuff, and I got 4 new struts from Univair. Well, I got them and started looking at them, and they came with this real heavy red oxide primer on them. Well, I started sanding that down a little bit to get it down to where I could paint them, and they found rust underneath them. They'd have been out in the weather or something. The metal was rusted, and they made the struts, cut them, and fitted the ends on them and everything, and made them up and didn't bother cleaning them up and just painted over the top of them. So that was pretty disappointing. If I'd have got the ones from Airframes Alaska, they sandblast theirs all down when they're done with them, clean them all up so they're nice and bright, and put a powder coat primer on them. Now they have an aluminum wing struts, which are supposed to be just as strong as the steel ones, but weigh half as much. So I don't know. This should get me through all the length of time I need. There's really nothing wrong with these struts that a little elbow grease and some fresh paint won't take care of. Well, I've got to get this exhaust system cleaned up and ready to go back on there anyway. Dug it out of there last night before I went in the house and finished up, and I went over it all with some paint thinner, washed it all down, made sure and got all the oil and stuff off of it. Now I've got my die grinder out here with some Scotch-Brite pads on it. I'm going to go ahead and go over it all, clean up. I got to clean up those faces where it mates up to the heads on the engine, and then I'll go over some other places that have some gunge buildup on them and stuff, and get a good look at it so I can inspect it. Everything is looking good so far, but you never know until you get all the junk cleaned off of it where you can see the metal real good. Okay, so this is what the face of these flanges look like. They're not too bad, but they're a little dirty. This is what they look like after I polished them up a little bit. That's a whole lot better. Well, this is the end where it slides into the muffler, and that was a little crusty. Got it polished up now. This exhaust stack is for the 180 horse, the 0360 Lycoming on the Cub. Most of the exhausts that you get for it are going to be for the 0320, which is a 150 horse engine. And so this is basically the same exhaust system. Like I've said before, everything on the 0320 is the same as the 0360, except the cylinders are longer. And because the cylinders are longer, the engine's a little bit wider. So they take the 0320 exhaust system and they weld on this addition here onto where it slides into the muffler. The same on this end. This is where the two stacks slide together. This one is for the number 3 cylinder. You can see this one's for the number 3 cylinder. You can see it's got a hole in there for the EGT probe to fit into. So this, the number 4 cylinder one, then slides into this here underneath the front end of the engine, and this has been expanded out too. Well, I got these stacks from F. Atlee Dodge in Anchorage, and I've got another set of them up overhead that I had overhauled for spares in case something happens to these. It used to be that F. Atlee made all these stacks, and they were pretty good, but this was a new set when I bought it, and it was after F. Atlee sold out to Univair, and it's pretty crude. It's got some big old honking welds on here, so you can't even get they couldn't even get the nuts on here to hold down, pull down tight, to hold flat on these flanges. I had to grind those welds out around there so the nuts and washers would fit on there. I got big old welds on there, and they're kind of not nearly as clean as what I used to see from F. Atlee's shop. Well, I'm going to go ahead and polish this thing all up. It's a little bit rusty here and there on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and polish this up a little bit, especially where these stacks, these down tubes on the stacks are. And that way I can see better. I can look at it now, and I can't see any signs of any exhaust leaks out of it anywhere, which would show up where there was a crack. But I'm going to go clean it up, so I got nice bright metal to look at and go over it and make sure there's no cracks or anything in it. That stuff looks a lot better. Going over it with the Scotch-Brite and the die grinder there, got a chance to get a pretty good look at everything. But now I can get in there and really inspect stuff, get in there to those welds and around the other places and stuff, and really do an inspection on things. Sometimes if there's a problem, if there's something wrong, haywire, you can see it better with the grunge and stuff off on it. And you can see where it's leaking. Like I said, I was looking for places where the exhaust was leaking, maybe a crack or something in there, and you can see it before you get it cleaned up. Where after you get things cleaned up, then it's harder to find. But most of the time, it's really hard to see any damage. Dirt, rust, grease, they cover up a lot of things that you can't really see. Probably the worst thing of all is new paint. If I look at something that's been freshly painted, I walk away from it, especially if you can look at it and see that they painted it over all of the old grunge and crap that was on there and didn't bother even cleaning it up. For the most part, it's better to look things over when it's clean. Although, like I said, there are exceptions to that rule. Several years ago, there was a Boeing 737 that part of the top came off of it. A couple people got sucked out and stuff. They managed to land the airplane, but pretty traumatic experience. And I remember at the time, some mechanics I talked to that worked on airlines and stuff, they said that they regretted the time when they outlawed cigarette smoking on the airplanes. The airplanes are pressurized, and the cigarette smoke would be in the air in the cabin of the airplane, and if there were any loose rivets or any leaks or anything in the skin of the airplane, it would show up and you'd see the brown stain from the cigarette smoke coming out of those rivets and stuff, and it made it a lot easier to find loose rivets or cracks and problems in the skin of an airplane. And when they outlawed smoking on airplanes, then they didn't have that luxury anymore. So anyway, like I said, all that stuff is all cleaned up now, pretty good, polished up, and I can go over it now, and I'll get a magnifying glass and check all the welds and places like that, and go over the whole thing looking for any cracks or any damage in it that needs to be fixed before we put it back on. Alright, I worked on this exhaust system last night, polishing it up with a Scotch-Brite pad on my die grinder. These exhausts have slip couplings here where one stack, this will be for the number two cylinder there, and this goes into the muffler here, and the number 1 cylinder stack slides into this one, and it was all crusted up with exhaust crust. Well, I got that all cleaned out. The same thing for the number 3 cylinder, 4 cylinder stack. This is the muffler, and those stacks slide in here in the end of the mufflers here, and then there's a clamp that goes on those, and that got all crusted up in there with exhaust crud. Now I got that cleaned out so that those stacks will slip together. Now they go like that, and then of course there's a clamp that goes down over the top that clamps it together. So that's all cleaned up. Then I worked on this muffler and cleaned it up, and I did the same thing in it. I went down here where the slip joint is on it and cleaned that out. And a regular Super Cub muffler has cones in it in each end of it, and they're perforated, and it has a perforated sleeve inside of it, a tube inside of it. Well, there's an AD on these that you have to open them up, take the muffler exhaust off and look in the muffler. I don't remember whether it's every 50 hours or every 100 hours. I think it's 50 hours. But anyway, go in there to check on those cones. What happens is, as the muffler wears and gets burnt inside, those cones can come loose, and when they do, they slide down and slide down into the exhaust tube itself and kind of partially block that, which makes a restriction in the exhaust, and of course that causes a loss of power. So you have to open those up every 50 to 100 hours to check. And then the other thing you have to do is you have to take the heat shroud off. And this is the heat shroud. You have to take the heat shroud off, check and see if there's any cracks in the muffler that would lead exhaust into the heat shroud. And what the heat shroud does is it takes air, and you get fresh air coming in it. Here, you get fresh air coming in one of these ports, and then the air gets heated and it comes out this port and goes into the cabin heater. And then we've got another one that comes out here. We've got a special adapter on this so that the air will come out here, and this goes to the rear seat heat. Well, anyway, and then we've got air coming out here that will go to the carburetor heater, the cabin air box, or the carburetor air box, to melt any carburetor ice, any ice that builds up in the carburetor. So that one really doesn't make too much difference, but you don't want exhaust gases coming into the cabin of the airplane and getting carbon monoxide poisoning. So you have to take the shroud off the muffler and check for any cracks in the muffler, any leaks in the muffler, to make sure you're not getting any carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide coming into the cabin. So this muffler is an F. Attlee Dodge muffler. They call it a hot rod muffler. It has a larger tube. There's no baffles inside of it, and it has a real large exhaust tube down here, the down port. So we don't have the AD on that to take the exhaust stacks out of it every 50 hours to check for the cones, because there's no cones in here. It's just a bare tube, no baffles or anything. So I know guys say they can tell when I'm coming by, because this airplane sounds different than anybody else's, even with the same engine in it. So I'll get over this and check, and I don't see any signs of any exhaust leaks in here, any cracks in the tube or anything like that. It all looks good. I'll go get a magnifying glass and go over it a little closer. Last thing I want to happen is to get carbon monoxide poisoning when I'm flying. Then we'll start putting it back together, and then I'll start going over all these exhaust stacks and make sure there's no cracks or anything in those. I've got them all cleaned up now, so any cracks in them will show up better. Well, I got the shroud back on the muffler. It's all back together. Didn't find any cracks or leaks in it. I kind of have a personal interest in whether that has any leaks in it or not, so I didn't find any in it. No sign of anything. Got the exhaust stacks all examined. They all look good. I just put them out of the way. So, looking good there.